Hello and welcome to another session with me, that GM guy, also DM Dev, however you want to call me. And I'm going to be handing off just a little bit more of my 17 years of experience off to you guys to do with as you please. Get caught up to me, surpass me, whatever you want to do. But we're going to be talking about how to make your game a little bit better with a session 0. Now, last week we did discuss doing your pre-planning kind of thing, the basic of the basics, avoiding GM burnout and all that good stuff. So this week we're going to say, you've caught up on your story. You know roughly what you want to tell, roughly what you want to do. Now, how to get your players involved and really interested in what they want to do. So, what we're going to do first is we're going to sit your group of players down. Now, whether that's 4 or 6 or 8 or however many you can handle, sit them down and let them know this is going to be your session 0. This is where we're going to talk about character creation, that kind of thing. And give them in very broad strokes what your story is going to be. So if we're using Cannibal Corpse God, kind of like before, we're going to say, hey, look, this is going to be a story about resurrecting a dead god, and the villain you want to stop along the way, kind of thing. The guy who's doing this is not resurrecting a good god, so we're going to be resurrecting a god. It's going to be probably a fairly intense horror-themed campaign. There's going to be probably a whole lot of hack and slash, but that's my story. That's what I want to tell. Okay? Once the players have that in their minds, that very broad stroke kind of thing, you're going to ask them, what do you guys want to see of this campaign? Offer them options. Do you actually want it to be a horror campaign? Do you want it to be more focused on RP? Do you want it to be more focused on hack and slash? Do you want exploration? Do you want survival? Offer them options and see what they say, because that's actually relatively important. You have your story, let them also help you tell it, because that's going to determine, like we had last week, the whole mini arc thing. That's going to determine what your mini arcs look like, just a little bit better, like clearly define them. And the more options you can get from your players, the better off that's going to look. The more clear the details, the more clear the stuff that you can rip off them, that's going to be awesome. Next, you want to warn them about what potential triggers are going to exist in your campaign. Already, as a GM, you're going to have that story partially built. That means that you are going to have things already set up that might be potential triggers for them. And it's really important that they actually know what those potential triggers are. So for the Cannibal God campaign, there's going to be cannibalism, obviously. There's going to be death. There are going to be people eaten. There's going to be religion. Let them know what those triggers are. And if they're okay with that, that's awesome. If they're not okay with that, then try to limit that kind of exposure in your campaign. Or if they're not comfortable with the entire premise of the campaign, you need to find another player. Don't try to shoebox somebody into your campaign, and don't let them force their way into your campaign to completely change everything just because they're not comfortable with it. If they're not comfortable with the vast majority of stuff, and you know that this is a story you want to tell, got to be fair to yourself. There will be other stories for them to enjoy. There will be other sessions for them to join in on. This one's not going to be for them. Now, you also want to discuss consent with your players. There is going to be RP. What makes them comfortable? What makes them uncomfortable? And having that discussion is really important, because this is going to determine whether or not you're allowed to roll with an 18+ game. Now, by that I don't mean you have to include a lot of racy, erotic scenes or anything like that if it's an 18+ game, but it means that you're not going to hold back on the swearing, you're not going to hold back on the gore, there's going to be gross content, there's going to be a bunch of different stuff, right? So you need to be upfront with them and say, hey, this is what my game is going to look like. Now, if at any time something makes you feel ridiculously uncomfortable, then you just create a word. Like, hey guys, I want the scene to fade to black because I am not comfortable with this. Let them know that at any time that they don't feel comfortable, they can do that. And let them know that you might do that as well. That they might try for a scene that you're not comfortable with. And you can fade to black. You can assume that this happens, you succeeded, so this is essentially what you're going to get out of it, but I'm not comfortable role-playing that kind of thing with you. And, of course, make sure they know that they can do the same thing. Let them know that they don't have to role-play out difficult scenes that they find hard to deal with just because you want to. They can ask for a fade to black just as easily as you can. Respecting personal boundaries is a lot about what this game is about, and you need to be able to do that. To that end, to avoid any sort of awful feelings at all, always, always, always make a trigger list. Discuss with your players. Ask what for them is off limits. And not just off limits, but what for them is kind of really hard for them to deal with. For me, that is any sort of unwarranted assault. That's a really hard one to talk about, so that is something we're not going to go for. That is a hard limit for me. That is not being discussed in my game. Okay, you're also in my games. You're also not going to attack children. That is not a thing that I will allow, ever. That is a hard limit for me. Kids get an easy pass. This is Skyrim. They're immortal. Don't even try it. And that can be any number of things. If you have someone who's a severe arachnophobe, you're going to avoid spiders. Let them know that there are hard limits and soft limits. A hard limit is this is never happening in my game. If this is discussed, we're fading to black. We're going to have a real big discussion about consent because you just violated mine hard. And you might not be welcome back in my game anymore. A soft limit is something different. It's going to be a, hey, I'm not really comfortable with this. I prefer to avoid the nitty-gritty details. Like I know one of my players absolutely doesn't like the discussion of intestines for whatever reason. So I don't start going on about how you pull out this person's intestines, their entrails are everywhere, it's splatter and gore and awful. No, it's a soft limit. So I might say, as you cut across this person, you notice they kind of grab themselves by the stomach and keel over. That's I am not discussing their thing. I have approached it. I have backed away respectfully, and that is a soft limit. So you need to have room for both. Because if you have too many hard limits, the story is hard to tell. But that being said, if someone says it's a hard limit, and respect that. Don't try to shoehorn it. Don't try to make them comfortable with it. Don't try to slowly broach it in your story. If it's a hard limit, it's a hard limit for a reason, and you don't know what trauma they've been through. And you just had this consent talk. They're not consenting to it. What you're doing is not okay. Always respect your players' consent limits and make sure that they respect yours too, because you are just as important as they are. Okay, and to that end, discuss the warnings. Discuss the warning signs like, hey, look, if this is too big, I got to tap out. If I say tap out, if I say fade to black, you got to respect that. Hands down, you have to. Because if they can't respect that part of it, they can't respect the fact that you're asking for a break, you're asking for a timeout. If you can't respect that from your players, then you're not actually respecting each other at the table. You're not having a cooperative, fun game. You're having a horror story in real life, and that's traumatizing and awful. And I've had it happen to me before, and it makes me want to leave the table, and it has broken up friend groups. You want to avoid table drama as best you can. It's better to have table drama over a magic item gone wrong than it is over somebody really pushing limits. Gotta respect that stuff. Okay, now into kind of lighter topics. Discuss your house rules. Before you start a lot of craziness or house ruling, a lot of things, let your players know what kind of house rules you have. For me, I completely ignore 5e's house rules on healing. Just because you went to sleep doesn't mean that broken arm gets itself patched up real nice. Just because you went to sleep doesn't mean that all that blood you lost mysteriously replenishes. No. I have a very basic house rule for that kind of thing, which is very simply put, you heal your level times your con every night. You can use your hit dice to heal up, but your hit dice only replenish by half their maximum pool every night. It makes players a lot more strategic with their short rests and long rests. Make sure that, just because you have a long rest doesn't mean you can use short rests 15 times a day to use hit dice whenever you feel like it. You have a definite limit. And that makes it a little more real for me. A little less flimsy, my heroes are immortal all the time kind of thing. So that's just one of the house rules I use. Now, I've seen house rules like the Miraculous Crit, where you roll with advantage. You roll both 20s or you roll both 1s. And it's not just a crit, it has an enormous effect. It's a huge bonus. Or it's not just a crit fail, it is this insane crit fail that just did not do you any favors whatsoever. It may have knocked you out, it may have knocked you prone. It did not do good things for you. So that's another one you could use. There's a ton of stuff like that exists out there. There are optional and variant rules in the game. And if you don't know all of your house rules, that is A-OK. When someone brings up to you that what you're doing is not part of the game, push it off to the end of the session and then have a discussion about what house rule you want to include. And if the players don't like your house rules, then either you can change them to something that they're more comfortable with, or if you're very staunch and like this is how you want to play the game, that's another time where you just need to say, hey, look, this is the house rule I want. If you're not comfortable with that, you may have to find another game because this isn't just your game. It isn't just my game. It is everyone's game. And if everyone else is comfortable with this and you're not, this might not be the group for you. And that is something that people have to get comfortable with saying, even if they're your friends, even if they're people that you're really close to. if they're not going to be a good fit, don't shoehorn them in. Don't force them to play your game, and don't let them force you to play theirs. This is a cooperative game. Come to an agreement together that everyone is comfortable with, and that's okay. Compromise. But don't let them force you to do things, and don't force yourself to do things for them. Fairly simple. Now that you've decided what house rules you want to include, you need to go over what kind of character concepts that your players should be looking at. Hey, my campaign's taking place a lot in the mountains. You might need someone with survival. You might need someone who speaks Goblin. Let them know kind of what they need to succeed in your game. Don't spoil everything, of course. But in my Cannibal Corpse God campaign, absolutely, you're going to need someone with religion. Doesn't mean they have to be like super huge. They don't need to be a paladin. They don't need to be a cleric. But someone with religion is going to be super helpful. Someone who speaks celestial is going to be super helpful, right? So let them know what kind of character concepts are going to succeed and what kind of character concepts they're going to need. And discuss with them. Let them know, see what they think, what they want. And working all together as a group, you can come up with a solid party. This doesn't mean that you need to force someone to be a cleric. You need to force someone to be a fighter. No, if you know ahead of time what kind of party they have, you can adjust your monsters to meet their party's difficult points. If you know they're not going to have a frontline fighter, don't throw a bunch of melee grunts at them, throw more spellcastery stuff. Use those miracles that from the gods to change and alter the terrain to have an effect on them. Don't force them into a melee combat that's not good for their party. And this is better because you've already discussed, now you know ahead of time what the party is roughly going to look like. You can prep your first few sessions just based on that. Right? And again, that's something that you can take from your players. That is a huge amount of stuff you can take from them, especially if you can manage to eventually tailor your encounters to match their party level, and you match their strong points, and you push their weak points. You've created this epic campaign where every fight is actually a challenge, and it's not just some laughable steamroll either way where your party members continuously die all the time, or they stomp everything and there's no difficulty whatsoever. Next, help with character creation. Ask if somebody's having a hard time with anything. Like, hey, do you know what you're looking for in spells? Do you know what's going on here? Here are my resources. Do you need some books to look through? Whatever, offer them help. Don't say, hey, look, I want to take a look at your character sheet, see what you did wrong. That's kind of insulting and not very nice. But asking if you can help them, I see no problem with that. That might save them hours of time and effort, and it might only take 15 minutes, because I know for me, I can make a 5th edition character, like a full-out spellcaster, any level 5 character in 5 minutes or less. Super, super simple. So I don't mind helping my players out. It's a little less stress on their thing. It doesn't take me a whole lot of time. Ask if you can help with character creation, and ask if anyone is really good with this kind of character. Hey, Joe Blow over there wants to play a psychic warrior. Has anyone played one in the past? Do they have any hints or tricks or anything like that they want to throw at them? If they do, that's great. If they don't, then you guys look it up together. And then lastly, discuss your schedule before it's set in stone. I want to play once a week. I want to play once every 2 weeks. I want to play once a month. I want to play 5 times a year. Whatever it is, discuss your schedule, get a solid idea, solid grasp, and make sure that your players can't just not show up for whatever reason many sessions in a row. Now, I know for that's hard to tell in advance for a whole lot of people, that they might not be able to actually get everything else set up the right way the first time, and having a little flexibility in your schedule is great. But if a player is going to join your party and have all of this commitment, because you're committing yourself to helping them with their backstory and stuff like that, to helping them create their characters, to helping them with all this awesomeness. And if they don't have the respect to actually show up for many sessions in a row, if they're not willing to make time, again, that's another point where it's like, hey, look, maybe you're not right for this party. So that's the last little bit of advice I really want people to know is, if somebody is not right for your party, don't force it. It doesn't matter if they're your best friend or your mom or your sister or whatever. If they're not right for the party, if they don't respect consent, if they don't, tell you about their own triggers, if they don't tell you, what they want to see out of anything, if they don't agree with your schedule, they don't like your house rules, wait for a different story. There's going to be a different story. There's going to be more time to play and have fun. You don't want someone who's going to slow you down or drag out the story, ruin your immersion, be very selfish or anything like that. You want a group of players that are going to be there to help you tell your story. Your story isn't the entire group story. You don't want someone who wants to be the center of attention. So it works in some. And if that's the story you want to tell, you want to focus on one person as the center of attention, that's cool. Then you find someone that's like that. But by and large, storytelling is a cooperative, everyone gets involved kind of game. So make sure that you find the right people for you. Because as the GM, you have a whole lot of responsibility. You're doing a whole bunch of different roles. And not that it's any more important than your players, because trust me, they are important. Without them, your story goes nowhere at all, because there's no heroes. But you do a lot. And you have the right to feel just as comfortable, just as relaxed, just as immersed as they do. So find players that fit you. And that's pretty much my advice for session 0. We're going to hit the big points again. Decide on your story. Discuss it with them. See what they want out of the game. Warn about your triggers. Talk about consent. Make that soft or hard list and make sure everyone knows what it is. If you want to keep it anonymous, that's a really good way not to, bully people. Like, again, Joe Blow decides that, hey, because I don't know, Hillary over here has a hard limit on seeing babies, I'm going to randomly throw baby references into things, but not really discuss it. I just want to trigger her. Well, no, make it anonymous. That way it's not like a trolley kind of thing if you really need to. I know I get people to text me theirs, and then if it's like a huge list, I make sure everyone gets to see it. If it's not a huge list, I just remind people at the beginning of game every time these are our limits. I know that I have in my games, I have 2 handouts in each game, which is hard and soft limits, and a consent thing if people need to reference it. And I make sure that I tell people to, if you need to add something, add it. If you want to talk about it, let's talk about it. Don't just let anything fester. Yeah. So, So after make sure they consent to hard limits, discuss your house rules. Make sure people know your house rules, because it's real crappy when you have this character concept built and then someone decides, hey, no, actually I house ruled out their main ability. Crap. Make sure that you discuss the character concepts. Make sure you help them with character creation if they need it. Don't force that on them, of course. And lastly, discuss the schedule, because that's going to be a nightmare if you're like, I want to play once a week. But Joe Blow over there knows he can only play once every 2 weeks. But he's just going along with it because, that's what you say. So he misses half the sessions. Makes everyone feel crappy. Discuss your schedule. Discuss what you guys need out of it. And again, if a player really doesn't mesh, doesn't match up, don't force yourself to do it. Okay, that's it for me today. Next week, we're going to be going over essentially what we should be looking for in character backgrounds and how to help somebody make their character background in either 5th edition or really any campaign at all. Because why not? Most background generation is essentially similar throughout all of your things. There are random roll tables you can go through. There are life events you can do. But we're going to discuss how to make one from scratch, no extra help. And we'll see how that goes. So until then, thank you so much for watching. Enjoy yourselves. And as the usual when it comes to these advice things, biggest thing is be kind to each other, be kind to your players, and make sure they're kind to you too. Have a great day. Bye.